So yeah, I work at a Columbia Bank. I'm IT project manager. We are a regional bank in New Jersey, mostly New Jersey. We have over 70 branches. We focus on retail. We also focus a lot on commercial lending as well. So we, at some point last year, we were looking for a new ITSM tool. We didn't have one in place, so we went out and did some review of the different ITSM tools out there, and we picked JSM as our ITSM tool. So what we did is we started to break out, what do we want in the ITSM tool? And then we hired a vendor to sort of help us implement the tool at a Columbia Bank, basically. And with four main parts that we wanted ITSM tool to do were, number one, IT requests. So be able to take in, requests from users through a portal, whether it be, hardware, software, or anything else, be able to intake that. The second piece is change management. So we now have change management requests going into JSM, and that feeds into our CAB meetings every week. Third thing is incident response, incident requests. So if we have things that trigger incidents or vendors send us alerts and things like that, that goes into the incident requests project and triggers off whatever needs to get done there. And then the last one is HR, which is what Prabhu is speaking more towards. That's another area that we wanted to build out. And then the last piece to our foundation were assets. And we want to build out a full asset set of schemas. And one of them being people, hardware. Oh. Okay. One of them being people, hardware, software. Those are the main three schemas that we have built out so far. So when it comes to HR, which is where we kind of want to really focus on, is we first wanted to get all the assets, all the employees in the asset schema, and be able to maintain those assets having to be up to date. So our system of record was really our payroll system, ADP. So that's where all the employees are housed, in ADP. So the idea was to get ADP to feed assets in JSM. And that's where we started to use OnLink, which is Onward's tool, that will sync ADP's employees with your assets in JSM. And that sync today happens every 4 hours. So if HR goes in and makes a change, that will sync within 4 hours to the assets in JSM. And we're only taking a subset of all the data from ADP, just most of the main elements that we need to know about an employee in JSM is what we're pulling in today. But obviously you have access to the full schema. So in order to get OnLink, connected, we needed to subscribe to ADP's API service. So we started contracts with them. And then once we got access to the API service, we hooked that up to OnLink. And then every 4 hours, we had them syncing the assets. So that was one part of it. Now that we have our assets, we wanted to then have, we have a person, we know all the hardware they have, we know all the software they have. So it's sort of like a graph that we could do with the schemas to be able to see everything that employee has from a graph perspective. So this way, when we're working on a ticket, we know who you are, we know what computers you have, what devices you have, what software you have, everything we knew about each employee. So that was sort of the first goal. The second goal was to start taking in events from ADP. So ADP has a subscription service where you can subscribe to different events. And the first main event is the hire event. So when HR hires a new employee and they enter into the ADP system as a new hire, that event will trigger the API to then trigger a tool called OnRamp, which is another Onward product that takes in events from ADP. And once that's triggered, that will trigger a project flow in JSM and then take action on that. So what we've done with that is once an employee is hired in ADP and it triggers it, an event triggers in JSM and creates a new HR hire request that will order new hardware, base hardware for somebody, order base software depending on where they're located. If they were a branch employee, we'd have certain software. If you were a back office employee, we would order certain base, standard software. And then a request would go out to their manager for approval. And then that manager could also add additional software or any other peripherals that they needed to do their job. And that would be all housed in a Jira request, JSM request. And then once that onboarding new hire ticket is approved by the manager, then subtasks are created for each one of the systems for IT to then provision them. And then that will get tracked along to make sure that the employee, when they arrive, have all the software, all the access they need, all the different things that need to get done to hire somebody and bring them in, to have them active the first day they come in. So that was a pretty large piece that we had built out using ADP events. The second set of events that we started to consume were events that when employees onboarded, there are things that could happen afterwards. They could have name changes, they could have department changes, title changes. So all those events will also trigger JSM tickets for IT to action upon based on the type of event. So if they had a department change, then we would go in and change their department and be able to remove their software that they had access to or re-provision things that they needed. So those sorts of events that happen, we would have tickets for as well. The third thing that we worked on was offboarding. So when an employee is terminated, there's two types of terminations. The first one is a future termination. So if someone is resigning and they're going to resign in a week or so, their end date's going to be a week or so, that's a future termination. If there's a situation where HR wants to terminate somebody immediately, that's an immediate termination. What we wanted to do was, one of our requirements is that when someone is terminated, we have an SLA to make sure their access is terminated within a certain period of time. So what we did was, when someone is future terminated, HR would go into ADP and put a future termination date in. That would then send an event to OnRamp. JSM would pick up that ticket immediately, and they would have to notify downstream systems that this termination was going to occur. And in order to do that, OnRamp has the ability to do an API, to call out to an API. But with security, the security department did not want us to call the API because of certain other risks that they felt were not mitigated enough. So due to IP ranges and things like that, and being able to lock the whole thing down. So one of the things that we had thought about was to send a file of the termination to an SFTP server so that the downstream systems can consume it. So with that in mind, we used the AI product from Onward. which allows you to do an API request or a file transfer, a secure file transfer. So that file then went to our secure file transfer piece. Then a system would consume that and then run an Active Directory termination on our Active Directory and provisioning system. So they would be cut off from the system immediately. So ADP event comes in for termination, it flows down on OnRamp as an event, then goes to AI to send a file to our SFTP server, which would then be consumed, and a termination would be actioned in Active Directory or Azure in the cloud. Same thing with an immediate termination. We would do Active Directory termination. We also would refresh their tokens to make sure if they were on an iPad or any other device, it would wipe out the device immediately. So those two events were had some other developments that we had to do to be able to terminate somebody in Active Directory. That was a pretty large piece to get done, but it's now working just fine. That was terminations, onboarding. I think that's it.